He pulled me out of the darkness, called me his light. But when I finally trusted him, he threw me back into the abyss. But then, I turned that darkness into the grave he couldn't escape from, pulled me out of the darkness, called me his light. There are certain kinds of pain you can't explain, not with words, not with tears, not even with screams. It just exists, heavy and permanent, like a second skin you can't peel off. That's what I was living with when I met him. I wasn't really living though. I was surviving. Barely. Moving through days with a kind of hollowness that made time feel like water slipping through my fingers, useless and fast. I'd stopped feeling anything real. Happiness was a foreign language. Trust? A cruel joke. And love? Love was something I watched happen to other people from behind a glass wall I never dared to touch. And then came him. It was a great Thursday afternoon in late November. The world was already preparing to sleep for the winter, leaves gone, skies low, wind sharp. I was sitting on the library steps in the same black coat I wore every day, hands stuffed in my pockets, knees tucked close to my chest. I had nothing to do and nowhere to be. That's the thing about falling apart quietly. No one rushes to catch you. You just land in pieces. That's where he found me. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat down beside me, close enough to feel like company, far enough to feel safe. And then, in this calm, almost amused voice, he said, "You look like someone who used to shine." I didn't look at him. I didn't even blink. I wasn't used to strangers speaking to me, much less with that kind of poetic confidence. But something about the way he said it, like he wasn't mocking me, like he meant it, made a crack in the wall I had so carefully built around myself. He didn't leave, even when I stayed silent. He just sat with me. The next day, he came back. This time with 2 cups of coffee, one for him, one he left near me without asking what I liked. I didn't drink it that day. But the third day, I took a sip. Vanilla hazelnut. My favorite. I never asked him how he knew. I didn't want to know. Somehow in that cold and lonely season of my life, he became the only warmth I could stand. He was patient, like someone who knew how long healing could take. He never pried into my past, never demanded answers, never offered hollow pity. Just presence. Just steady, consistent, calm presence. And that, more than any grand gesture, broke me in the gentlest way. He'd show up every afternoon, sometimes with snacks, sometimes with a book, sometimes with a story so ridiculous it made me laugh out loud, which shocked me more than him. Laughter felt foreign in my mouth. Wrong. But he looked at me like it was magic. He started calling me sunlight. I told him not to. Told him he had no idea how dark I really was. But he'd just smile and say, "Even shadows need the sun to exist. That means you're still here. That means you still matter." God. He had a way with words. Weeks passed like that. My darkness didn't vanish, but it dimmed around him. I began to open up, little by little. Told him things I hadn't even admitted to myself. How my father left. How my mother broke after that. How I was the collateral damage in a war I never started. How love for me always ended in silence and scars. He never flinched. Not once. He listened like every word was sacred. I should have known better. But when someone hands you hope with bare hands, you forget to look for the cracks in their palms. Eventually, he invited me into his world. I met his friends. They were warm, open, the kind of people who smiled with their whole face. I didn't belong, but he made me feel like I did. He'd introduce me like I was someone special, someone he'd been waiting to find. And in quiet corners of parties or campus cafes, he'd touch my hand or tuck my hair behind my ear like I was fragile glass, and he had no intention of dropping me. I told myself not to fall. Told myself this couldn't be real. But my heart, my stupid, aching heart, believed him. I fell. Hard. I let him in. He was the first person I allowed to see all of me. The broken, the bruised, the terrified, the hopeful. And when he held me in those nights when the nightmares returned, when he whispered that he'd never let go, when he said, "You're my light, don't ever dim again," I believed him. God help me, I believed every single word. But love, I would learn, is not always a sanctuary. Sometimes. It's the prettiest disguise the devil wears before he shoves you off the cliff you didn't know you were standing on. And what he did next would burn brighter than every promise he ever made. For a while, it was everything I never thought I could have. He became my routine, my comfort, my home. Every text, every smile, every lingering glance across crowded rooms, it all felt like the beginning of a new story. One where I wasn't the broken girl on the sidelines, but the one someone had actually chosen. The one someone fought to understand. But the thing about broken people is, we can sense shifts, even subtle ones. The day the temperature changed, I knew. It started small. Missed messages. Shorter replies. The kind of silence that wasn't empty, but calculated. He began canceling our usual afternoon coffee meetups with vague excuses. I told myself not to overthink it. Old fears, right? Just ghosts from the past. But ghosts don't lie. People do. The smiles he once reserved only for me began to appear when he spoke to her. Tessa. She was pretty. The kind of pretty that got noticed before she even spoke. Loud in a charming way, always laughing, always surrounded. I didn't blame her. And at first, I didn't even blame him. Because he was mine. Wasn't he? He told me he loved me just 2 weeks before it all shattered. We were in his room, lying on his bed, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing my spine like he was memorizing the lines of my pain. He said it so softly, I almost didn't catch it. I love you, you know. I don't care about where you've been. I just care that you're here. With me. It was the first time anyone had said those words to me and meant them. Except, he didn't. Not really. Because 2 weeks later, I saw the messages. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't that girl. But when his phone lit up while he was in the shower, and I saw her name flash across the screen with a heart emoji, something in me snapped. I know you're not supposed to look. I know you're supposed to trust people. But I had trusted. And when you've been burned enough times, your instincts become survival. So I picked up the phone and read everything. The first thing I noticed was how long it had been going on, weeks. Maybe even before he first kissed me. The second thing? How effortless his lies had been. He told her she was the real thing. Said I was just someone he felt sorry for. That he didn't have the heart to drop me, when I was clearly clinging. Clinging? I had let him into my soul. Given him pieces of me no one else even knew existed. And to him, I was some wounded bird he could pity his way into bed with. I remember the way the air left my lungs as I scrolled. It was worse than a punch. It was like drowning, silently, with no one to save you. When he came out of the shower, smiling like nothing had happened, I couldn't even speak. I just stared at him, the phone in my hand, shaking. His face changed instantly. And I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not guilt. Annoyance. He snatched the phone, swore, turned away like I had betrayed him. I told you I wasn't ready for anything serious, he shouted. That was a lie. He told me I was everything. You were hurting, and I was trying to be kind. I didn't mean for it to get so intense. Intense? Was that what he called months of love? Of promises? Of touching my scars and saying they were beautiful? I should have screamed. Should have hit him. Should have broken everything in the room. But I didn't. I just stood there, watching the stranger in front of me. The man who once said I was his light, now glaring at me like I was the inconvenience in his story. You said you loved me, I whispered. He rolled his eyes. People say a lot of things when they're in bed, and that was it. No apology. No remorse. Just a cruel smirk, like he was proud of what he'd done. I left without another word. Without crying. Without yelling. Something in me had died in that moment. and something else was born in its place. It wasn't heartbreak. It was fire. He thought he had thrown me back into the abyss. What he didn't realize was that I had learned how to live in the dark. And this time, I wasn't crawling out. I was dragging him in with me. The world didn't end after Adrian betrayed me. It just shifted. Like the ground beneath me cracked, and I suddenly saw everything for what it really was. Every lie dressed up as love, every sweet word sharpened like a blade. I didn't cry that night. Not one tear. Instead, I sat in my room in complete silence, staring at the wall, my fingers numb, my chest hollow. And then, somewhere around 3 a.m., a single thought rose from that stillness like smoke from a slow-burning fire. He thinks he won. And just like that, I stopped being the girl who needed saving. I started becoming the girl they regret betraying. But revenge isn't rage. Rage is loud, reckless, and messy. And I didn't want messy. I wanted perfection, something sharp, cold, and unforgettable. I wanted to become the kind of nightmare you wake up from sweating, the kind you can never explain, but never shake. So I began to watch him. Not like some obsessed ex-girlfriend, no, that's not who I was anymore. I wasn't the fragile girl on the library steps. I was reborn, quiet, calculating, and invisible in plain sight. He didn't even notice. That was the beauty of it. He thought I had disappeared, ghosted, gone back into my hole of depression. He never imagined I could be waiting. But I saw everything. I watched how he moved on publicly with Tessa like I never existed. How he paraded her around with the same lines he'd used on me, same laughs, same glances, same half-whispers of forever that meant absolutely nothing. And Tessa. She was so certain she was different. That made it even easier. You see, when you've been the girl before, you know exactly how the game plays out. And this time, I wasn't playing defensively. I was building the battlefield. I started collecting things, small, seemingly insignificant details. Names of his friends, passwords he used, secrets he'd casually dropped into late-night conversations when he thought I was too sleepy to remember. He had no idea how much I'd really listened. He once told me about his side hustle, flipping stolen IDs for quick cash. Stupid, arrogant, and reckless. It was small-time fraud, sure. But illegal is illegal. He'd laugh about it, brushing it off. Said it was just a game. Said everyone does shady stuff to get ahead. That was the first domino. He also kept everything in his notes app, protected by a code he swore no one would ever guess. But he had told me his mother's birthday once. Said it was the only date he ever remembered. I remembered too. 6 digits. 1 entry. Suddenly, I had everything. Names. Amounts. Contacts. Receipts. But I didn't send it to the police. Not yet. No, that would be too easy. Too clean. He needed to feel it first. Just like I did. I started with whispers, anonymously messaging some of his friends with hints. Tessa's best friend got screenshots of his conversations with other girls. Not mine, others. Because of course, there were more. Adrian wasn't just a liar. He was a collector of hearts, never caring how many he crushed along the way. The chaos began slowly. Tessa pulled away first. His friend group started getting colder. One by one, the people he used to stand with began to shift their weight away from him. He didn't know why. He couldn't trace it back to me. That was the point. He still had his smile. Still walked around like he owned the world. But I could see it in his eyes. The cracks. The confusion. He was losing control. And I wasn't done yet. Not even close. It's strange how quickly a reputation can crumble. Adrian had built his like a monument, charming, magnetic, effortlessly confident. He was the golden boy everyone trusted, admired, envied. The one who walked into every room like he was the sun. But even the sun can be eclipsed. And I was the shadow coming for him. The whispers I started planted doubt. Doubt bloomed into suspicion. And suspicion, when nurtured with just the right amount of truth, becomes a wildfire no one can contain. It started at a party, one of those house events where everyone drinks cheap beer and pretends their lives aren't falling apart behind their curated Instagram smiles. Adrian was in his usual spotlight, laughing, drink in hand, Tessa by his side again. She had come back. Of course she had. She didn't want to believe what her friend told her. She needed to hear it from the source. And Adrian? He was a master of manipulation. But I was done playing checkers. I was playing chess now, and I was already 10 moves ahead. So, I sent the first real blow through an anonymous email to Tessa. No accusations. No emotional outbursts. Just cold, hard evidence. Screenshots of his side hustle texts. Money exchanges. Conversations with girls from the week after he told her he loved her. Time-stamped, dated, undeniable. And one photo of him in bed, shirtless, with another girl curled under his arm. Not me. Someone else. Another disposable heart. She opened the email during the party. I watched from a distance as her smile cracked, phone trembling in her hand. Her face turned pale. She looked at him, really looked, and I saw it happen. The instant the illusion shattered. The moment she saw the monster behind the mask. She slapped him in front of everyone. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. And just like that, his perfect image began to bleed. But I wasn't satisfied with just one moment. I wanted the unraveling to be slow, public, and permanent. The next week, someone submitted an anonymous tip to the university ethics board. It included proof of Adrian selling fake IDs, helping classmates cheat on exams, and using connections to get girls into parties he later blackmailed them for photos from. I didn't even have to lie. Everything I used was true. He was arrogant enough to leave trails everywhere. All I had to do was follow them. The university launched a quiet investigation. Professors started treating him differently. Friends stopped answering his texts. His roommate moved out. His smile faltered more and more with each passing day. Still, he tried to maintain the performance. Tried to charm his way through the cracks. But charm is useless when no one believes the act anymore. I passed him once in the hallway. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did, but didn't recognize me. I wasn't the girl sobbing into his hoodie anymore. I wasn't the invisible shadow clinging to his warmth. I was the storm walking silently beside him. And he never even knew the lightning was coming. Until the night everything finally collapsed. It was the night of the senior gala, his last chance to stand tall, to flash that grin, to pretend like he was still the king of something. I showed up. Not because I was invited, but because I wanted to see it end. Properly. I wore red. The kind of red that demands attention. The kind of red that bleeds royalty, power, vengeance. Eyes followed me. Whispers trailed behind me. I didn't care. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Adrian saw me from across the room. And for a second, I saw it in his eyes. The flicker of something like regret. Or maybe fear. He started toward me, drink in hand, mouth slightly parted like he was about to say something real for once in his life. But before he could reach me, the dean stepped onto the stage, cleared his throat, and read a list of students under formal investigation for serious ethical violations. Adrian's name was first. The room gasped. Phones came out. Tessa backed away from him like he was poison. And Adrian stood frozen. He looked around like someone would stand up for him, defend him, believe him. No one did. Because by now, everyone had seen the screenshots, heard the rumors, knew the stories. The golden boy had rested. He stumbled out of the gala like a wounded animal. And I followed, quietly, until he stood alone outside under the pale flicker of a street lamp, hands shaking, breath fogging in the cold night air. That's when he saw me. Truly saw me. And for the first time, he looked small. "What did you do?" he whispered, voice hoarse. I smiled. You pulled me out of the darkness, I said softly. Called me your light. Made me believe I could trust again. He flinched. Because he remembered. Because deep down, he knew he had destroyed something sacred. And then, I continued, stepping closer, you threw me back into the abyss. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize. Maybe to beg. But I wasn't finished. So I stayed there. In the dark. And I built a grave for you with my bare hands. He looked around, desperate, broken, lost. You have no idea who I really am, I said, low and quiet. But you will. And then I walked away, into the night, into the silence, into the power of becoming my own salvation. He was left behind. Alone. Exactly where he put me. After the gala, Adrian disappeared. He stopped posting. Stopped showing up to classes. Word spread fast. He'd been suspended indefinitely pending investigation. Some said he might even be expelled. Others whispered that his scholarships had been revoked. I didn't care which version was true. All I cared about was that the world finally saw him the way I did. Not as the savior. Not as the golden boy. But as a fraud wrapped in charm. He had built his empire on broken promises, and I had torn it down brick by brick. Quietly. Efficiently. Ruthlessly. But even then, it wasn't over. Because revenge doesn't end when they fall. It ends when you rise. For the first time in years, I could breathe without pain. Walk without second-guessing my steps. Look in the mirror and see someone whole, not just stitched together by someone else's hands. But scars, even healed, remember. And one night, I got a message. A burner account. No name. No photo. Just 3 words. You ruined me. I stared at the screen for a long time. And then I laughed. Because he had ruined me first. The difference was, I learned how to rebuild. He never thought I would. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. My silence was the final nail in his coffin. But fate wasn't finished with him yet. About 2 weeks later, I got a call from Mia, a girl I barely knew. She'd seen my number on a flyer for the mental health support group I helped organize. Her voice was shaking. She asked if I had time to talk. I didn't ask why. I'd just met her at the cafe down the street. And when she sat across from me, tears in her eyes, the first thing she said was, "Did you know Adrian too?" My stomach turned. I nodded, slowly. Why? And then she told me her story. Different words. Same pattern. He'd met her during a rough patch. Made her feel seen. Special. Needed. Then used her body. Her secrets. Her fears. Then discarded her the second someone shinier came along. Her hands trembled as she spoke, as if even recalling his voice left bruises. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. Because I knew that pain too well. And by the time she finished, there were 5 more names she mentioned, girls like me. Girls he'd broken. Girls who thought they were the only one. They weren't. He had a pattern. He didn't just hurt people. He hunted them. I remember sitting there, cold and still, as realization sank in. What I had done to him. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. And it wasn't enough. We came together, me, Mia, and the others. Quiet at first, unsure, scared. But when women speak the same language of betrayal, something stronger than fear begins to grow. We filed an official complaint, not just with the school, but with the authorities. I handed over everything. The screenshots. The photos. The list of names. Every lie he ever texted. Every threat he ever implied. And this time, it wasn't a whisper campaign. It was war. He got arrested. Nothing dramatic. No flashing lights or cops tackling him. Just a quiet knock on his door and handcuffs that clicked louder in his ears than they ever could in mine. He tried to deny everything, of course. But predators are always loudest when cornered. His parents came to his defense. His lawyer tried to paint us all as jealous exes. But there were too many of us. Too much truth. Too many scars that aligned too perfectly for it to be coincidence. The media picked it up. Not big headlines, just a few local articles. But enough. His name, once associated with honor rolls and future internships, now sat beside words like manipulation, emotional abuse, and sexual coercion. And as the world turned on him, I felt nothing. No joy. No satisfaction. Not even pity. Just peace. Because I didn't need him to suffer the way I had. I just needed him to never do it again. And I had made sure of that. After Adrian's arrest, the noise faded. The gossip, the whispers, the stares. They all began to quiet. People moved on, as they always do, chasing the next scandal, the next story, the next tragedy to dissect. But I didn't need noise anymore. For the first time in years, I had silence. And this time it wasn't empty. It was earned. I moved out of the apartment that still smelled like our memories. Got a new place near the river, where the windows let in so much light I almost forgot what darkness used to feel like. I filled the walls with art, my own, raw and messy and honest. I let the paint pour out through colors, brushstrokes, words I used to be too afraid to speak. I changed my number. I deleted every old text, every photo, every piece of digital residue he left behind. My phone was no longer a graveyard of broken promises. It was a clean slate. And yet, I wasn't trying to forget. I wasn't trying to erase him. No, that would be too merciful. I wanted to remember, not the way he made me feel, but the way I survived. Because survival is an act of rebellion when someone tries to bury you in your own shame. I kept volunteering at the women's shelter. What started as a distraction became something more, a purpose. I met girls who were just beginning to understand the kind of man he was. Different faces, different stories, but the same bruise beneath their voices. And I helped them speak. I helped them rise. Some days it was hard, triggering, heavy. But other days, most days, it was powerful, healing. Like we were stitching each other together one truth at a time. Mia became one of my closest friends. We'd meet for coffee every Tuesday, share updates on school, work, therapy. She still had nightmares sometimes. So did I. But we talked about them, let them out into the air instead of locking them inside. We weren't victims anymore. We were architects of our own aftermath. And Adrian? He became nothing more than a cautionary tale. He lost everything: his academic future, his fake reputation, his army of enablers. His trial was still pending, but the court of public opinion had already decided. No one mourned his fall. No one defended him anymore. Even the ones who once doubted us had gone quiet. But even with the storm behind me, there was still one more thing I had to do. One place I hadn't returned to. The bench. Our bench. The one where he first told me I was beautiful. The one where he kissed me under autumn leaves. And I believe that maybe, just maybe, I was finally safe. I went back there one crisp afternoon, scarf wrapped around my neck, wind whispering through the trees. The bench was empty. And I sat, not because I missed him, not because I wanted to relive what was, but because I needed to reclaim it. That place. That version of me. The girl who sat there once, full of hope and trembling trust. She hadn't died. She had been buried. But now, she had clawed her way back up. And she wasn't afraid anymore. I pulled a small journal from my bag, the one I'd started writing in after everything fell apart. I flipped to the last page, and in neat, steady handwriting, I wrote, "He pulled me out of the darkness and called me his light. But when I finally trusted him, he threw me back into the abyss. So I stayed in the dark, built a fire, forged my fury, and turned that abyss into the grave he couldn't crawl out of." I tore the page out and folded it in half. Then I placed it under the bench. Maybe one day, Someone like me would find it. And maybe it would remind her. You don't have to stay broken. You can rise. And when you do, don't just survive. Make sure they never forget what you survived from. I stood up and walked away. Not from pain. Not from trauma. But from the shadow of a boy who thought he could own my light. You never really know how strong you are until being strong is your only choice. People say that all the time, like it's a quote printed on Pinterest boards and yoga mats. But when you've dragged yourself out of hell with nothing but your bare hands and stubborn will, you understand what it really means. I didn't just survive Adrian. I outgrew him. I became someone he wouldn't even recognize anymore. And thank God for that. Because I was never meant to stay small enough to fit inside the cage he called love. Now, I was building something new. It started slowly. I went back to my art seriously, not just as therapy, but as a declaration. I poured paint into canvases, turned memories into brushstrokes. I entered a local exhibit on a dare from Mia. One of my pieces was accepted, then sold, then featured. It's strange how peace doesn't come in a grand moment. Not with an apology. Not with justice. Not even with revenge. It comes slowly. Like a sunrise after a long, black night. You don't even realize you're standing in the light until you notice you're not cold anymore. That's where I was now. Months had passed since the letter. Since the last whisper from the man who once tried to drown me in his love and call it salvation. I hadn't heard his name again. His trial had come and gone, quietly. He pled out. No media frenzy. No courtroom drama. Just quiet consequences for a boy who once thought himself untouchable. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. He wasn't the main character in my life anymore. I was. I had started giving talks at schools. Small groups. College workshops. Telling pieces of my story, not as a sob story, but as a warning and a weapon. I looked into the eyes of girls who still wore smiles like armor and taught them what no one had taught me. That love doesn't hurt. That love doesn't destroy. That the moment someone asks you to shrink so they can feel bigger, you need to run. And they listened. Not because I had all the answers, but because I had survived the questions. Mia came with me sometimes. She spoke too, her voice growing steadier with every room. We were no longer survivors hiding in the shadows. We were the storm that followed. Leo was still by my side. Never in the spotlight. Always in the wings, holding my hand when the memories came too fast, rubbing my back when the grief resurfaced in unexpected waves. He never tried to save me. He just stood in the fire with me, without flinching. One evening, after a speaking event, I returned home to find a small package on my doorstep. No name. Again. I hesitated. Something about it felt final. Inside was a single photograph. An old one. It was me, sitting on that bench from years ago when everything was still innocent. I was smiling, looking off into the distance like I believed in fairy tales. Behind the photo was a note. You were always too good for me. I didn't know how to love you. I only knew how to keep you. I stared at the handwriting. It was his. Adrian's final attempt to haunt me. But this time, I didn't feel shaken. I didn't cry. I didn't burn it. I just placed it in a box. A box full of past things, photos, letters, journals I no longer needed to reread. I sealed it shut and tucked it into the back of my closet. Not out of fear. Not out of sadness. But because I was ready to move forward, without forgetting, but without dragging the weight behind me anymore. Because healing doesn't mean pretending the fire never burned you. It means knowing exactly where the scars are, and still reaching for the sun. 1 year to the day since everything began, I returned to the bench one last time. This time, not to leave pain behind, but to offer something else. I sat down with my journal, now almost full, and tore out one final page. I folded it gently and slid it into the same space beneath the bench. This is what it said. If you're reading this, you've probably been broken, hurt, used, lied to, Maybe you feel like you'll never breathe right again, but you will. One day, you'll wake up and realize you don't flinch at his name anymore. You don't miss what he pretended to be. You'll rise, not because you weren't destroyed, but because you decided your story doesn't end in ashes. And when you do, make sure they remember who lit the match. I walked away without looking back. No more fear. No more fragments. Just me, reborn. I couldn't believe it. The same hands that once trembled while holding his lies now created beauty from ruins. I was finally being seen, not as his girl, not as his victim, but as me. Whole, fierce, untouched by the shadows of my past. And then something happened I wasn't expecting. I met someone. Not in a whirlwind, fireworks kind of way. There were no grand declarations or dizzying infatuation. It started simple. He was a photographer. We met at a gallery event. He complimented my work without pretending to know more than he did. He asked questions that weren't invasive, but curious, respectful, quiet, and he didn't try to fix me. He never once said, "Tell me everything that broke you." He just stood beside me while I rebuilt. His name was Leo. He didn't flinch when I told him I'd been through something. Didn't pressure me for details. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He just showed up, consistently, with coffee, kindness, and that steady energy that felt like safety instead of seduction. For months, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. But it never did. Because Leo wasn't there to tear me down. He didn't want to own me. He wanted to walk with me. And that was something I never thought I'd have again. The first time he touched me, just a simple touch, his hand brushing mine, it felt like something soft, something sacred. Not a demand, not a transaction, but an offering. And I realized in that moment what real love is supposed to feel like. Not chaos, not fireworks, but peace. Still, healing is not linear. There were nights I still woke up in cold sweats. Moments when I flinched at certain words, certain smells, certain memories. Guilt tried to creep in. Why couldn't I just move on faster? But I learned to be gentle with myself. Because I wasn't broken anymore. I was just scarred. And scars are proof that you survived. One day, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address. No name. Just my name on the front in shaky handwriting. Inside was a single page. It said, "You win. I lost everything. Are you happy now?" No signature. No explanation. But I knew who it was from. Adrian. And for a moment, I just sat there, staring at the words. I thought I'd feel triumphant, victorious, vindicated. But all I felt was nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because it didn't matter anymore. I didn't need to win. I didn't need to prove anything. He had taken enough from me already. I wasn't about to give him one more second of my peace. So I took the letter, tore it clean down the middle, and tossed it into the fireplace. And as the flames consumed his words, I whispered, "You don't get to live in me anymore."